we're going to make a Manhattan Style Burbot Chowder. And there are lots of different recipes for different chowders and fish soups, and burbot would work fine in any of them. So the particular ingredients that are going into this soup isn't really the important thing. The more important thing is just the techniques of getting the burbot from the water to the pot and onto the table. And you can use the same technique with just about any soup that you would make. But most chowders have potatoes, so we'll just start with peeling and cutting up some potatoes. All right, so we're just cutting these potatoes into some little cubes now. The smaller you cut them, the faster they'll cook. Might be easier to eat when they're smaller too. I'm not real particular about getting them all exactly the same size. Okay, so we got our potatoes chopped up. We also have vegetables, carrots, peppers, and celery. The recipe called for 4 potatoes. This was 8 small ones. We've got about a cup and a half of carrots, a cup of chopped celery, and about a cup of green peppers in here. This is a Manhattan chowder, so it's going to have a tomato-based chowder instead of the New England style white or milk-based chowder. The recipe also calls for onion, and so the onion would probably go in here as well, but I decided to go with the dried chopped onion. We got 1 bay leaf. There's also thyme and salt and pepper in here, so pretty straightforward. And then we'll put some parsley in at the end. And of course we've got the meat that's going to go in. And like all great recipes, this one starts with bacon. So we're going to do some bacon first, and then we'll do the fish. Okay, so we're going to start with bacon. So that's going to be the main fat that we're going to use to get our vegetables kind of sauteing. We're not going to use all this. We only need six pieces, but we just got this out of the freezer. This is from a pig that I helped butcher, so that's why the bacon looks a little irregular. But that's okay, because we mostly just need the fat. So just throw this in here. Yeah, let's throw a little bit more in there. That doesn't take long. Getting this bacon cooked. Main thing we want to get is that grease, because we're going to use that to saute our vegetables a little bit and add that great bacon flavor to our chowder. Once we get the bacon cooked down to its crisp, we'll pull it out and set it aside, because then we'll bring it back in later to finish the soup. Just crumble it in there. So we're done cooking the bacon. If we were using onion, we'd throw that in there now, but we're not. So we're just going to put the rest of these vegetables in here and get them cooking. We don't need to get them completely tender. We only need to cook them for about a minute or so. And then we can start adding the rest of our ingredients. First thing I'll put in there is just the water. The recipe calls for about 3 cups. You could use chicken broth or chicken stock, or the fish stock if you made fish stock from burbot, the burbot heads, or from some other fish. That would be a nice touch. And I've got one 28-ounce can of crushed tomatoes. And we can throw our potatoes in there now. And our seasoning, so this is bay leaf and some dried onions, some thyme, salt, pepper. Now we want to get this up to about the boiling point. Once we get that boiling, we're going to throw our fish in there. So this is the whole trick with dealing with small burbot that you don't want to fillet is you get them steamed, kind of boiled, but you just want them cooked enough so that the meat will come off the bones. If the trick is to cook them long enough that you can get the meat off the bones without them really just falling apart. And that, I can't really tell you the time on that. It's just you kind of watch it and you know, test with a fork, and eventually it'll be at the right consistency. Okay, so this is starting to cook. What we have here are all of our burbot that we did. Here's even that little guy that was probably only 12 inches. But we'll still get meat off of that, equivalent to about a reasonable sized perch. These are the little pieces of belly meat. These we don't need to throw in now because those are already boneless, so we can set those aside. But now that our soup is boiling and smelling very good, just kind of laying them in there. So it's not so much going to be steaming here. Some of these are going to be more of just kind of poached in the liquid. In fact, maybe all of them will end up being poached. And then we're going to put the lid on it. And this whole thing, the whole soup needs to cook for about 30 minutes to get those potatoes soft. We're gonna let that lid on for probably about 7 minutes, and then we'll check on the fish and see if it's starting to get to the point where it'll flake. And once we start to see it, you know, where it wants to flake with a fork, just like when you're cooking fish in any other way, then we'll pull it out of there and let it cool down so that we can pull the meat off of the bones with our fingers. All right, so our fish have been in there cooking for about 7 minutes on the top of that soup. So we're gonna pull the lid open now and check it with a fork and see if the fish is ready to come out. Yeah, it looks like it's about ready, so I'm just gonna pull the fish out, and we're gonna put them in here and let them sit aside, cool off a little bit while the potatoes continue to cook. And then we can get in here and pull the meat off of the bones. It smells really good. So yeah, we did it about 7 minutes. If in doubt, probably 10 minutes would have been fine. I think they wouldn't have fallen apart too much at that point. So there's that fish. We'll just let that cool down a little bit. We'll put the lid back on. All right, so we got all of our burbot pieces out of the soup. I guess we poached them / steamed them on the top of the soup. And they're basically done at this point, but we're just gonna go and pull the meat off of the bone so we can throw the meat back into the pot. And this is because these fish they're on the small side, and just the way their bones are structured, they aren't quick and easy to fillet like a perch might be, so that's why doing it this way is a little bit easier. So this is the front part. This would have been the head up here and the tail back here. And you can just go in here with your fingers and don't want that part necessarily, but you're just pulling this meat right off. You need to be careful you don't get the bones. So here's the ribs. The ribs kind of stick right out. They don't bend down around. They're kind of weird, which is one reason why the filleting is a little different. You just need to be careful you don't get the bones in there. I'm just going to throw that in there. Yeah, there's some bones in that. Yeah, so that's all meat. There's bones along there. There's some fins. The fins kind of run right along the top here, so we want to get those out of the way too. And then we can just take this other side out. You can see it's a very nice looking, firm meat. Then the tail section, with the tail so there's fins that run along the back of the fish and on the belly side, and I usually just start back by the tail and just take those fins out first. It'll save you a little hassle later. So because those are bones there, just do the same on this side. Okay, we got those fins off, and then you just go back in, and it's pretty easy to just pull the meat right off. And so yeah, that's the tail section. And so we just need to repeat this with all these guys in here. So there's the meat that we got out of our 6 burbot. So that's not bad. That's probably about 1.5 pounds of meat right there, which is just right for our soup. I'm just feeling in here to make sure I don't feel any bones. It looks pretty good. I'm gonna just tear these up a little bit too, just to get them into smaller chunks. But you can see that's a nice looking meat, and that's why some people call this poor man's lobster. They'll just steam it and then take it like that and just dip it in melted butter and eat it like that, and that's certainly a good way to do it. So the soup's been simmering for about a half hour, so the potatoes should be tender enough now, so we're gonna check it. And I'm just gonna stick those potatoes with the fork, and they seem to be tender enough. We'll check the carrots too, they should be fine. Yep. All right, so the vegetables are cooked enough, so that means it's time to put the fish back in. Some of this fish is already cooked. I have the uncooked belly meat still down in here, so we'll need to let that cook a little bit, but it won't take long. We'll just throw this back in there, let it heat through, make sure that belly meat gets cooked, and then we'll be ready to crumble the bacon on top and throw the parsley in and eat it. So I'm stirring it up, and I'm kind of trying to break up that meat a little bit as I go. But we'll put the lid back on that and let it cook a little bit longer. Just turn the heat up a little bit. So we put the fish back in and let the cooked stuff warm back up and let the uncooked belly meat get cooked. So we're going to take a look at it now, make sure everything's breaking apart nicely and is done, and then we'll be close to ready to eat it. There's a piece of belly meat, and it's not quite breaking apart yet, so we'll make sure we let that cook a little bit longer. So we're still letting the fish warm back up and the belly meat cook, but we're going to throw some parsley flakes in there. You can use fresh parsley too, but we're almost done, so we'll just put the parsley in near the end. We'll just let that sit on top. We added the parsley. The fish should be cooked now. I'm just going to check one more time, stir it one more time, and then we'll crumble the bacon on top, and it'll be ready to go. Get the bay leaf out of there. I don't need that anymore. All right, I'll just let that keep simmering. Now I'll just take our bacon and crumble that in there. Okay, we're just stirring that bacon in now, and we can turn that off and get ready to taste it. All right, so we're ready to try our soup. I'm gonna get it out in these cups and let it cool a little bit. We pulled this out so we could get the taste more of just the burbot itself instead of with all the ingredients in the soup.
All right,
Okay.
try it. Definitely has that cod flavor.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you can tell it was cooked in liquid versus, you know, baked or whatever, but that's definitely a white cod meat flavor.
And there's really, I mean, other than it, being on top of the liquid it was in there for 7 minutes. Most of what you're tasting there is the burbot. And
right, the fish.
Pretty good.
Yeah.
It's a nice firm texture, which I like. There are a lot of fish soup recipes out there. In the United States, there's probably not so many, but if you were to look online, a lot of different cultures, especially in Asia, make a lot of fish soups, and some of them are really good. When people think about burbot in Vermont and eating burbot in Vermont, the first thing that comes to their mind is chowder. And there are different types of chowders. There are the white milk-based chowders, which we think of as like the New England clam chowder, and then there's the red ones like this, which are tomato-based. And but there's so many different recipes out there that you can choose from, and burbot is going to match well with a lot of them.
All right, you think it's cooled off enough? Still looks pretty hot.
We'll give it a try. Yeah, I don't know.
It's a nice winter taste. It's not as thick as maybe I was assuming it would be. But it's good. It's nice and light. But it's got that Actually, it's not. It doesn't have a really big fish flavor.
No.
It smells like fish, but it doesn't really have that big of a fish flavor to it.
Yeah, and that's one thing I found with burbot. You can, with other fish soups, I've noticed if you let them sit and then reheat them, you'll taste more of the fish flavor. But with burbot, that doesn't really seem to happen. In fact, it seems to taste better after you warm the soup up in some ways.
Yeah, that's surprising. When we cook fish at home, I always try to eat plan how much we're gonna cook, how much I think we're gonna eat, because I don't like reheating fish.
Yeah.
So that's good to know. This could be something that you could actually use to take in a thermos to work or something, and heat it up later. That's nice. It's got good color too.
Mm-hmm.
I think you could probably safely say it's a very small portion of Vermont's population that's ever tasted burbot before. This is certainly my first time ever tasting it. And this whole process from how we caught the fish to skinning and cooking was very new to me. I'm I'm very new to ice fishing. So this was definitely one of the more educational pieces for me, which I very much enjoyed. So this is great. Oh, bacon. I gotta get some of that.
Well, there's relatively few people that even fish for burbot, and not everybody that's catching them is cooking them and eating them. So yeah, it is a pretty niche thing, I guess.
Yeah, and I remember seeing a post maybe a couple years ago from Vermont Fish and Wildlife with a picture of a burbot saying, hey, if you catch one of these, don't just dump it on the ice, and take your perch home or whatever. These are very good eating fish. Take them home with the rest of it and, cook it up. I mean, this is a very tasty. In fact, I would almost venture to say that you could trick someone into eating this who doesn't eat fish, and they might think that they're eating chicken or something else in here. I mean, it's very mild.
Yeah, right. It's very mild. I guess it kind of looks like fish, but the texture is pretty firm. Not as firm as chicken, but
very good. Well, I appreciate you taking time to do this and getting me out there, teaching me how to catch these, showing me this recipe. This is definitely something to add to the repertoire of things to eat, especially in the winter. It's a nice warm meal. Yeah, I could see this being very much a cold winter day, something nice to have. So yeah, appreciate it.
Yep.
All right, thank you. Thanks for watching this episode of Vermont Master Anglers. For more content, visit our Facebook page @Vermont Master Anglers. If you're watching us on YouTube, please like and subscribe.